how far I got in the first part of my painting for aerial perspective. And today I want to show you how to add some trees and other details to make that foreground look closer to us and to give us truly that feeling of aerial perspective. So I'm going to use a little bit of masking tape on the corners because paper tends to curl up after it has been wet. Masking tape rather than Scotch tape, because Scotch tape is kind of hard to get off. Sometimes it might tear your paper. Okay, so we're going to start with some trees. And even though I have this tape down, I'm going to suggest that you do some practice trees first. So let me kind of show you how to approach painting some trees. So if they're really far away, I showed you pine trees the other day. I will, in the first video. This is going to be a deciduous tree, which is a tree that loses its leaves. And most deciduous trees have kind of a, not quite that brown, but more of a grayish bark if you really look at them. So I'm going to make it kind of brown gray. And I'm going to water it down some for our purposes here, but you may have to make it a little thicker, less water, to have it go over top of your colors that are already there. Okay, so when I paint a tree, I try to think how a tree grows. And I'm going to plant it in the ground. And then I'm going to pull my brush up. I'm going to start with the trunk. And then to make it look realistic, I'm going to start branching, and I'm twisting my brush to get it skinnier as it goes up. And I'm also using less pressure. So this is something you can practice by just laying your brush down and pulling up on it to try to get better at it getting skinnier. Because those little branches, those little twigs, you don't want them to be fat or your tree's not going to look real realistic. So you can make a whole row of these or a page of them, whatever you want so that you get better at it. But the process is to put the brush down where you want the branch to be the thickest, then pull towards your hand, and you can lift up and twist a little to get it to get really skinny out there at the end. So I tell people to think of V's and Y's when they are drawing or painting a tree. So I'm going to lay this brush down where I started my trunk. I might thicken that trunk up a little bit. And pull up a different way, creating a V, right? Or a Y, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to go into my first branch here and then pull out of that one. And pull some out straighter. Different trees look different ways. But this will, if you grow those branches out, and a good rule of thumb is don't have a branch that's growing out be fatter than the part that it's growing out of. So like say, if your tree, I'll put one over here, if your tree looks like this, the start of it, I'll get another branch up there, you don't want to go on and put a really fat branch out on it, because that usually makes your tree not look balanced nicely. So this is a no. No, don't make them that thick. So go back, and like I said, sometimes I have to turn the paper. So don't be afraid to, because when you're pulling the brush, it's easier to pull it towards you. So I'll turn my brush or turn my paper around and pull my brush up because it's easier for me to control it that way when I'm painting something like this. You can make your branches overlap. And you can put lots of little branches in. So I suggest you try some trees on your page and try learning to control your brush to lift it up to make those little skinny branches. See, that one got a little fatter. So it takes a little practice to do it. I remember that I have been doing it a long time, so it comes a little easier for me, but I still goof it up sometimes. Oops, see, got a little fat there. So good practice before you start doing it on your paper. So this is a fairly good sized tree. It would probably be, so you can go back and even out your trunk a little bit. It would probably be in the middle ground, maybe not the closest up, maybe, depending on what you want yours to look like. Now, when I make this a leafy tree, what I'm going to do, and you could make it a fall tree, you could do colors on your trees. I'll just do some green for today. I'm going to make some lighter green that's a little more yellowy. And I don't want my trees to look like what I call lollipop trees. I want them to look like they have leaf areas on them. So I'm going to be kind of irregular. Some of these trees would probably have branches coming out towards me where I wouldn't see the branches. I would just see the clumps of leaves. Disregard my little, see, in this kind of, on this paper, you kind of can wash away the branches a little bit there. Disregard these because that was just my practice. And I just keep going, leaving some space where you see the sky through it or the background through it, whatever. And I'm using kind of a lighter green right now, or yellower green. And sometimes you don't see up through them, but oftentimes you see little patches of the sky through your trees, and that will make your painting look a little bit more realistic. I'm watching my time because for some reason my camera has decided that I can only do this for 15 minutes, which may be enough for today. If not, I will add a little bit to my recording. Okay, so I've got some leaves going on there. You could do that with yellow or light orange if you wanted a fall tree. And then I'm going to go back in with some darker green. Remember how we mixed up our different greens for the mountains, but this time I'm going to add a little too much black. Add some black. Looks pretty dark. Still looks green though. Remember, you can have a page where you can test your colors and see if you like them. I think I'll get a little bit more green in that. And I can go in and kind of add some shadowy places. Usually underneath places where the tree looks darker. So it looks like sunlight is hitting the tree on the lighter places, and then you have some shadows underneath some of the clumps of leaves. So that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so I'm going to try adding some trees now to my painting. So this is where that aerial perspective comes in. You have to think that farther back trees are not going to be as detailed. So those might be good ones to start with. Second, I'll get so I'm going to make them a little more faded. I'm going to plant them out here near the, kind of beyond the pond. And I'm not going to worry about too many branches because I'm not going to see too many branches from far away. Yeah, tell me, I'm getting green in my yellow here. I want some lighter leaves first. I don't know if this is going to show up too well on my my very green mountains. If you have a different color mountains, yours may show up a little better. But I'm going to let it dry. I'm going to go and do a couple more. We'll do one down a little closer. This one's going to be a little bit bigger because it's closer to us. Maybe I should have made my trunk a little darker like that on that first one. So this one's going to be a little bigger, so maybe a little bit taller than that one. And you can let that dry before you go on. That may be, or use your hair dryer if you've got one handy. Okay, so I'll brush on some, tap on some leafy areas. And it's kind of fading into my mountains, but that's okay. That's the way things look from a distance. Then I'm going to do a few, let's see if we can do a few dark places. It's not really dry enough yet to add too many dark places to it. Now, another thing you can do is you can sketch this drawing out ahead of time, which is probably a good idea. I did, but you could work around, like if I went ahead and planned where my trees were going to be, I could work around that with this mountain and not maybe go into it completely so that you would see it better when I painted it. Let's do another taller one. Let's do one down here close. We could also add some rocks. This one's going to end up right in the middle of my picture, which may not be the best choice for where to put something. Remember, the middle's sort of boring. It's better to put things off to the side, but maybe we can balance it out with another tree. So we got a tree there. This one may show up a little bit better. You'll notice that some of your color will wash off of your, like you'll see your mountains lifting up a little bit when you try to paint over them. If you have a better watercolor paper, and there are special papers for watercolor, you might have better luck with that not happening. But I would probably plan for my trees. I wouldn't put as much dark color where I want them to be. Okay, so I'm going to let those rest. I can go back and put some darks in them like I showed you before. But I'm going to make a tree that's really up close. Well, I mean, we could make one here that we plant, put it in front of the lake, because this is going to help with our depth. Let's see. I'm going to go right up, over in front of the lake, and right up across the mountains. I'll make this one thicker because it's closer to us, so it's bigger. And like I said, I'm hurrying here. It'd be best if you let your back trees dry beforehand. But then you could go on like this, and you could add your leaves to this one. Oh, lots of branches makes them more realistic. Anyway, you could have a tree up close. Now, I could also have a tree that's up here, and it's kind of really close in the picture. I'm going to use a bigger brush and get really bold with this one. And my video is going to cut out, so hang in there with me, and I will be right back. Okay, so this bigger tree, and this one I would probably definitely kind of plan this better so that it wouldn't be, I wouldn't be painting the grass and everything over it, but we can make it work. So, a little more black in that. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of wing it, but you might want to draw your tree first. This is going to be a tree that we are standing, it's going to go right off the edge of the paper down here. Make it big, it's up close to us. And these are, you may want to practice this before you try it and mess up your painting. You may want to practice a bit. So it's going to cover up some of our road. Now I'm going to use this big brush, but then I'm going to change off to one of my smaller brushes when I get the biggest branches the way I want them. And I can turn that too and kind of get them to slim down. But this will really give your painting the feeling of having some depth. Maybe this one will be an old dead tree and we won't even put any branches on it. Or leaves on it, I guess what I was wanting to say. Oops, oh, I forgot it was taped down there. Just ripped it loose. You could see how this would be pretty with a snow picture where you didn't have any grass painted. And you could paint these beautiful trees right up over the snow areas. Put a little snow on the branches, things. You have to plan that, have to paint around things with watercolor. And my tree over here isn't quite dry, so I'm not going to paint too far into it. But as you can see, we could have this tree that kind of laps over the road. Now, I would want that to dry. I'll dry it real quick with the hair dryer. Oops, I have to just plug it in. So now I've got that dry. I could go in with a darker black that has a little less water in it, a brownish black. And I could really add some texture to this tree. Now I'm going to be kind of rough on my brush. If you watch me here, I'm going to splay it out so that I get some kind of rough bristles there. If you have an old brush, this is really a good trick to do. But I'm going to add some, maybe it might be a little bit wet, some dry brush techniques to give my tree some texture and some shadow. Might have a better brush for this. Let's see. One of these might work better. Yeah, down we'll go. And I can add some places where, as long as I get it darker than what I got on there, and add some nice texture. Make that tree really interesting. Texture that we wouldn't see maybe on those really far back trees. You might see some on this one because we're relatively close to it. So that's how you can get more detail. Now we also might want to do some of that with the grass. I could use this same little brush and go along, and notice how I've made it I've been mean to it, the poor thing, and use a darker green to put in some grass because we would see the grassy texture up here close to us, but as you get farther away, you would not notice that as much, not as definitely. I could do that, fill in with some, I could make some shadows off my trees, decide what way the sun is shining and add shadows to it. We could go in and I would keep doing that for a ways back, but then I would gradually kind of make it so there's not as much texture there because we wouldn't notice it as much farther back. I could also do some rocks. Let's get some gray, but I don't want it to be too dark. Let's do some rocks up along the bank of the pond here. Somebody could sit and fish, imaginary place. You could put rocks, the different sizes of rocks, all around the pond if you wanted to. I'm not going to take time to do that right now. That is totally up to you. I wouldn't make them all the same size. Make some of them smaller. Then I'd go in and probably add some shadows and things to those. And the other thing you could do is that maybe add some weeds. And remember, when you do those mean things to your brushes, go back, clean them under the faucet, and straighten the hair out so they won't be totally ruined. I'll take this brush, dry it out a little bit, and maybe some brown and green. Ooh. And do some cattails or something growing up in front of the pond. Weeds of some sort. You can add all kinds of details, things that you see outside that you like. You can take a single, very pointy brush and go in. Just remember that as they go back, you'd see less of them. They wouldn't be as distinct. Like over here, it would just be, your rocks would be smaller, and your cattails would probably be more faded. But you can really do some neat details. Now you could also texture up the road a little bit, give it some, maybe it looks like it's a roughed up dirt road. But you won't see those details way back as much. They'll fade away. So feel free to paint your own painting. Add your trees. I'd like to see you try some different trees. I did not put a pine tree in this one, but you could do that. I could put a close-up one here real quick. Remember that the way to do that is decide where you want the pine tree to be. I'll just make a small one over here. Put the center as tall as you want it to come up. It's going to be a small one. And then say, oh, I'm going to make it about that wide at the bottom so that you have something to look at as you're painting it. And then just back and forth with your brush. Don't go too wide at the bottom. Back and forth till you get the shape you want it to be. I don't put a trunk on them because many times the branches come out. I mean, some pine trees are like that, but many times the branches come clear to the ground. And let's see if we can put a little bit of dark shadow in it. It may be a little too wet, but you can remember to go back and add a few little shadows to kind of make that pine tree have some detail and depth to it. Depth is what we are going for. So let's add some, I could start and do some leaves. I would probably want to do them lighter first, but give it a try. See what yours comes out like. You'll appreciate Albert Bierstadt's painting a lot more when you try to do one. Think of him painting it in oils and painting it about 8 feet by about 5 feet tall. Now, that would take some time, I believe. So good luck, have fun. I'll be anxious to see what you have done at the end of the period. Remember, take another sheet out, practice some brush strokes so that you can control your brush and get it to do what you want it to do. Okay, see you later. Bye, guys.